Hi, everybody. We interrupt this vacation in order to bring you a live weathercast. Good evening, everyone. It's meteorologist Joe Cioffi. I'm not sure how many of you are going to be on tonight. I did take the night off last night. And by the way, excuse me for the lights in the background. I know they're distracting, but I don't think I can shut them off without shutting all of them off. And then we would see very little. But I was fishing. I'm upstate in New York, in Pulaski, which is just east of Lake Ontario, or the eastern shores of Lake Ontario. I can just take a very short 2-minute drive to the lake, and the warm weather in the east has just been spectacular because here it's been in the low to mid 80s. It's been beautiful, blue sky, sunshine, humidity low, just very, very nice. And I'm salmon fishing, and I went over 7 today. I had 7 good fights from 7 rather large fish, but in the end, I wasn't able to land any of them. But there is tomorrow and Tuesday and Wednesday, and I'm just kind of wiped out. So I figured that before I really just fall asleep completely, I would do a live cast. And welcome to everybody that's here tonight. Appreciate that you're here. Delvin, Scott, Paul Sack, Isaiah Jacob, Awesome Gamer, Two Bass Frisk, and whoever else that's joined. Raymond is on. Yeah, well, Raymond, I'm not that far from you. Well, I'm not that close, but I'm not that far from you. You got to 90. I think it got to mid 80s up here. It was really warm, but it's comfortable. And the fishing here is very good, by the way. Fishing here was a couple of years ago when I came up was awful because the breeding season, just from whatever cycle they were on, was just not very good. But the fishing here, the salmon fishing this year has been very, very good. And I had, like I said, I had 7 fights. One of my friends that was fishing next to me landed a few. He landed a beautiful king salmon and also a couple of others, and he had numerous fish on his line, so he did better than me, certainly. But anyway, let's start off with Hurricane Maria as it continues its march toward the north. It looks like the eye kind of jumped east a little bit on the loop, if you see it, and then it just coils back northwestward. So it's the average motion is probably 350 or 360 up off the Florida coast, which is to your left. And the Carolina coast is on the left on the top of the screen there. But this is going to make a close pass to the Carolinas, to the North Carolina Outer Banks. And tropical storm watches are in effect for the Outer Banks of North Carolina. So we're going to, I'll switch over to the Eastern satellite view so you can get a peek of this and from the wider perspective. Excuse me. And there you have it. Now, Maria is is a very large storm. As it's been moving northward, its circulation keeps expanding. When you look at the lowest pressure on Maria, which is down almost to 940 millibars, I mean, that's most of the time with storms that are deeper into the tropics, or even at this latitude, you would get winds of 120, 130 miles an hour or so, but the top winds are only 105. The largeness of the storm, sometimes when they get north of 30 north, this happens where the storm essentially starts to spread out a little bit, and we're seeing gales out to about 200 miles to the east of the center, and 200 miles to the east of the center, and I believe 150 miles to the west. So that's a pretty large stretch of gales, and I just want to lay it by contrast because I'll show you right in the corner here. If you go on the right of the screen, right in the middle, that is Hurricane Lee with 90 miles an hour. Top winds are 90 miles an hour, but it is so tiny that hurricane force winds only extend out 10 miles from the center, and gales only go out 30 miles. So basically, what we're talking about here is essentially the size of an area equivalent probably to a rural county zip code. I mean, that's how small that storm is. The size of a pea compared to Maria, which looks about seven or eight times as big. But sometimes that happens. You get these systems that either you got the two opposites here. You've got the Maria getting very big in terms of its circulation expanding, and you have Lee getting very, very small. Now, it is going to turn. There's no question that that Maria is going to turn. All the models show it. It's just a question of how far west does it get before it does so. And on the Hurricane Center's forecast map, the path of the core of the actual center of the hurricane is east of the Outer Banks by a good 120, 150 miles. But because the gales go back so far to the west, the Outer Banks will probably see some gales. If this is a shade further to the west in its track, and there are a couple of models that are on the left side of the envelope and more on the right side. But if it is a little bit to the left, you're probably going to see, some gales on the Outer Banks. And then it turns east-northeast because of what's happening across North America with the upper air pattern and the jet stream, finally getting ourselves a pattern change. Hurricane tracking models with this are all the same. They all, there's a couple of them that move it a little further north, and then you start to track to the northeast anyway. But you can see the large cluster of the hurricane model. Is Ann B. Davis in the middle of my screen? I didn't notice that. You can see that the hurricane tracking models all turn Maria out to sea. So that's going to be done. And, we were saying that the warm weather in the east with the big ridge, you probably have to wait for Maria to get out of the way, and that seems to be the case. We'll bring up the GFS model, and we'll look at the upper air first. I think that's probably a good thing to do. And all right, so we've had this big ridge in the eastern part of the United States and this trough in the east. And I'm sorry, let me start that again. You can see how tired I am. We've had this big ridge in the United States with a ridge in the east and a trough in the west. And this is really probably the longest we've seen that pattern last around here, given the last 4 or 5 months. I mean, we just had these sort of minor interruptions with the upper air, with the trough in the east and the ridge in the west, and when we got the ridge, it would last for maybe 2 or 3 days, and that would be about it. But we have been, this one's kind of been certainly much stronger. Perhaps some of that is a function of all the, the tropical systems and the strengthening ridge in the Atlantic, kind of, playing a role in building the ridge up to our northeast, to our northwest. But you can see how the ridge collapses as Maria gets to the Carolinas, and then the jet stream in Canada collapses southward and kicks it out to sea. That is, I'll get it a little bigger for you. Restart that again. And all right, so we'll start that from yesterday. And you can see Maria comes up, gets to about North Carolina now. We'll just watch those height lines that are up in southeastern Canada, how they drop southward. That's the jet and an upper air trough that's swinging around. So that kicks Maria out to the east. Also, it picks up Lee, and they both go out and out into the open waters of the Atlantic. This trough is going to swing through as we start the weekend. The models were trying to make some kind of wave on a stalled front, but if the trough is like this, it's likely not to happen. And then the next trough kind of dives in. There was also some debate. Some past model runs were trying to build the ridge back in the east in full force rather quickly. And while it does appear, it's not. It doesn't. It tries to pop up and get strong again as we move through the latter part of this period. The other run did not. That's why I'm kind of a little startled by this, because it looks like at least the late model run went back to a big ridge building in the eastern part of the United States. And actually, we have no flow from Canada at all. That's cut off, so it's just basically westerly winds across Canada and that ridge in the eastern part of the United States. So, it certainly would suggest a continuation of warmer than average temperatures as we move into the first 10 days of October. But I would be cautious with this, if only because of the fact that the prior run of the model, and I'll go back to that and we'll see it. The prior run of the model was a little different. It had a little more troughing around in the east and a little less ridging around in the east as well. So it just needs a second to load here. I guess it needs more than a second to load. Let me just run it backwards and give it a little more time. There's Maria. There's the collapsing jet stream out of Canada. Then that next trough swings around for Saturday and moves on through. I apologize, folks. It's just sometimes if the internet signal is slow where I'm staying, it causes a problem. Now you can see the old run actually tried to create a trough in the center of the country, and that would at least it wouldn't be the big ridge like the late model run, the 18Z just showed. Although it does kind of pop up again toward the end of the forecast period, but only briefly for a couple of days, and then another trough swings on through. So it has that run has a slightly different look to it. So that's pretty much it tonight. There really isn't too much else happening. We had some record highs today. We don't really have any other tropical systems, thankfully, to look at because I'm exhausted. So that's a good thing. And yes, that is Ann B. Davis in the middle. One of my friends on Facebook said something about the boxes, and then I suddenly remembered about the Brady Bunch, so I figured I'd give everybody a little bit of a chuckle. And where was a comment I did see from Mr. Russo? Where are you? Robert Russo. The fishing is very good up here this year. There were a lot of fish. I had 7 salmon on the line today. I lost every single one of them. One of my buddies that was fishing with me did a lot better, and then he caught a really nice king. There's pretty much all kings in there right now. We didn't see any other salmon in there. I didn't see any cohos. Didn't see any Atlantic salmon. Just the kings seem to be in there at the moment. John Van Oss, you're looking forward to me hearing my thoughts and analysis on the long range, the fall, and the winter. Well, I haven't had to say it for a while, but I'll say it now. I'm not really big on the long range. And when I say long range, I mean beyond the 2-week model period. I'm not going to get in. We'll talk about some stuff. We are going to talk about some stuff, but I'm just not. I can never have been able to get my head around the long range. It's too technical. There's too much stuff to look at, and I can't be looking at the short range and the long range at the same, on a given day, because I just don't have that time. And Justin Stewart, yes, this is a fish storm, by the way. Raymond lives in Cohost, New York, not Albany. Okay, your temperature gauge is the same as Albany, so they take it from the airport. Correction noted, Raymond. You still went to 90 today. Thank you, Kevin Francis. I really appreciate that. I'm not the reason why, Awesome Gamer, I am not the reason why hurricanes don't hit us. Okay? I'm not doing anything. There's enough geoengineering talk around on the internet as it is. I don't want people to think that I'm having something to do with it. So, Kevin Francis, there's you got your Ann B. Davis reason. Because of one of my buddies mentioning about the boxes, and I said they were very Brady Bunchish. So I thought I had an idea to give everybody a laugh. As far as the tropics are concerned, Awesome Gamer, yeah, we're going into October. It should start to slow, but given the kind of season we've had so far, I wouldn't be surprised. If we certainly could, we'll probably see if this is just an average October into November, we'll probably see at least 2 more named storms, maybe 3, and they might kind of skew more toward the first half of October than the second half. But pressures were going to be kind of low in the Caribbean, at least what the models were showing a couple of days ago. But they sort of shifted away from that, and they keep pushing it back to later and later in the period. So I think we're just going to have to wait and see. But after this, all these major hurricanes that we've had after, this busy almost 5 weeks from start to finish, it is time for the tropics to take just a little bit of a break. Tepe, you didn't, with Maria going out to sea, you really didn't miss too much. There's not a whole lot going on other than the record highs. And Robert Russo, yes, hurricanes don't like Rhode Island. You haven't had one into southern New England in a long time. And it's been I can't even remember the last one that came up the coast and went into just southern New England. Go to your router settings and change your channel to 6. You're probably clashing with your neighbor's routers. Okay, Timothy, I will do that when I'm done, and we'll see if that does anything. David Acevedo, the whole weather control conspiracy for BS has gotten worse as of recently. I know. I see it. I see it in my comments sometimes. I just don't respond to them because I don't have time. I just don't have time for nonsense like that. I'm not an X-Files type person, so I'm not doing it. Zachary, can Maria still make landfall, and is that worse than just sitting there? Well, no, Maria's moving northward, and I think it'll graze the Carolinas. I think the models are all pretty clear that the track is going to take it out to the east far enough that there won't be any major impact. And we're kind of getting late in the game here for models to do a real abrupt switch. The model shifts in these storms as you get into the short range, get smaller and smaller. Irma's shift was only about 20 miles. So I don't think those 20 miles are going to really make a huge difference. You're going to need a 150-mile shift in the model, and I just don't see that. I got to tell you quite honestly, from my observations with respect to this hurricane season, in the broad sense, the models actually have been pretty good in the broad sense. Now, when you get into the shorter time frames and you start to get these wobbles, these corrections that we had to make with Irma being more west and south, where with every run they weren't huge corrections. They were important corrections for the track because of the islands they impacted, but it seems to me that the model errors are, this year were actually, fairly reasonable. And the problem is that a 20-mile error at the end of the forecast period, when you have a storm going inland, that's important, and that's going to, that's a very small margin of error, but those 20 miles make a huge difference to whoever lives in them. Whoever actually lives 20 miles to the east or 20 miles to the west of the eye makes a huge difference. So that error size is probably not one that you're going to see shrink very much. It's just going to have to be part of the equation, and everybody has to understand that. Evening to James NASCAR fan from North Belmore. Good to see you here. And yeah, I agree, Lidl Griffin. It's time for a hurricane break. And we're going to get, we probably will get one for maybe a week or so. Raymond, I did not land any fish. I did have 7 on the line today that I had fights with, but I got one of them. I got very close to landing, but he broke the lure. He broke the fly just as I got him to within about 5 feet of me. So it happens. But I had a great time, and that's the most important thing. And I've got a couple of more days here before I figure out what I'm going to do next. And in the meantime, I'm just going to live stream once a day because I just don't have the energy for it. My life right now means I actually get up at 3:30 in the morning to get to the fishing grounds early, because I like to fish in the morning into the early afternoon and then come back and just pass out, which is what I did. All right, so anyway, have a great rest of your Sunday and a good start to your week. We'll do this again tomorrow, probably around the same time, maybe about 7 o'clock, and we'll see what Maria is doing. Again, we've got tropical storm warnings up for the coastal Carolinas from Surf City to the North Carolina-Virginia border. I would not expect those tropical storm watches. I'm sorry. I do not expect, I don't think we're going to see those watches expanded in any important way, either north or south. It looks like this is pretty much a done deal as far as Maria is concerned. And we'll say good night here, and we'll talk to you. Tight lines to you too, Sean.